Okay, today is February 18th, 2011, and today I'm going to review for you how do we formulate a thesis statement based on two short stories. So just for the sake of argument, we're going to use The Storm by Kate Chopin and The Story of an Hour also by Kate Chopin. And we're going to try to figure out what do these stories say. Well, actually, we're going to pull out abstractions about each story. Now, I think you will agree that both of these stories are about women in marriage, correct? And if we had to look at Calixta in The Storm, for argument's sake, what might we pull out about Calixta? Well, obviously, Calixta was so unhappy in her marriage that when she was tempted by a former boyfriend, Bobino, she consented to have an extramarital affair with him. So you would say Calixta was unfulfilled, right? In her marriage. And if you would move on to The Story of an Hour, Louise Mallard, remember, she heard that her husband had been killed in an accident, and for a brief moment, she opened up the door to her house and said, "Free, free, I am free." Then she went to the door after there was a knock on the door, and her husband appeared. So in the shock of seeing her husband again, she actually had a heart attack and died. So actually, for just a few moments, she was free. You could say, if you were drawing a generalization, Louise was, what might you say, unhappy, restrained, abused. I guess you would say restrained.
Did she love her husband?
Well, we're not really sure. But she was certainly restrained if in fact, she felt.
Excuse me, can you move the paper over?
Yes. Thank you. Louise was restrained in her marriage, or she was restricted in her marriage. So much so that when, for a brief moment, she realized that she was indeed unmarried, she was free.
Free.
Free, I'm free. So, can we draw another generalization about these two women in marriage? What can you say about them?
They did not have marriages they liked.
Okay, so if you were saying unfulfilled here and you were saying restrained here, what might be another adjective that would go with that?
Limited.
Unfulfilled, restrained, limited. Is limited sort of like restrained?
I see it as being less, so like limited.
I think limited and restrained are pretty similar.
They're too similar?
They are similar. I would go with, how about making it more general? Unfulfilled, restrained. How about
more general?
Yeah, how about unhappy? Isn't that good? That's simpler.
Yeah.
Unfulfilled, restrained, and unhappy. So that this is we're going to formulate a statement using these three adjectives. So, in both, how about this? In both of Kate Chopin's stories, the women in marriage were, how about this? Unfulfilled, restrained, and unhappy. How's that for a thesis? Do you like it?
Yep.
It's something that you can prove. You're going to prove that the woman in the storm was unfulfilled. You're going to prove that the woman in the story of an hour was restrained, and then you're going to prove that both of these women were indeed unhappy. So this is going to be your thesis statement, and it's at the end of your first paragraph. The next paragraph will be about the women being unfulfilled. Because that's most important. So you might say first, Calixta was unfulfilled, and give an example how Calixta was unfulfilled. You might even go on to say that Louise Mallard was unfulfilled in the story of an hour and give some proof about that. After you do that, you'll go on to what?
How they were restrained.
All right, so second, or also, they were restrained. They couldn't in those times go out and have careers. They couldn't strike out on their own. Women needed to be married or they were considered second-class citizens. So they really didn't have the option to break away from their marriage. What's going to go next? Last.
The unhappy part.
The unhappy. Most of all, I think the unhappy part is bigger than, being unfulfilled and being restrained also leads to the general attitude of being unhappy. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have that. Then you can go on to your conclusion, which will pull it all together. Therefore, according to Kate Chopin, women did not have the opportunity to be themselves, have the wherewithal to strike out on their own, have the ability to leave their husbands.
So basically, you just restate. The
You
thesis.
restate the thesis, but in a new way. In other words, now you take it even further to make your essay really pop. You relate this to life in general. Not only in marriage, but women couldn't express themselves in life. They couldn't become artists. They couldn't become professionals. They were basically relegated to the home, relegated to being mothers and wives, and did not have the opportunity to be anything other than their husbands' partners.
So when is this due?
The due date is, we can talk about that, but I'm more concerned that you get this right. that you see the formula. This is just the thesis statement that goes as the last sentence in the first paragraph. You'd have some generalizations up here, but this is the last sentence in the first paragraph. Then you go on to your second paragraph, third paragraph, fourth and fifth paragraphs to finish. It should be about 500 words.
Oh,
Any questions?
when's lunch?
Good job. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much. I hope I get an A.
I hope so too.